Welcome to the Frictionless Innkeeper Podcast. Coming right up, fresh tips and insights from lodging professionals aimed at helping you improve your business. Our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest App, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Steve Short, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Matt Langen. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I think this is our first podcast ever with somebody that offers interior design services for the independent lodging sector. And we're talking about James Kuester, who's the founder of Küster Design.
That's right. Yeah, you don't really see too many designers that have a niche with hospitality, but he talks a little bit about how he came to that sort of honestly, or, kind of as a growing up, and then really a couple stops along the way, but eventually got to the point where, yeah, he likes to work with small businesses and loves the hospitality, independent lodging sector for sure. So pretty cool, pretty interesting guy, pretty cool background. And he does the kind of stuff that I think's really neat in terms of design, and it's just a really creative kind of a profession as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it definitely is a creative profession. And I really liked how he talked about how it's like, whatever you do, make sure it's commercial grade products. That stood out to me. And he also talked about how whatever you do reflects your brand. And the first time a guest comes to your property, first impressions are important too. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that he talked about that you wouldn't normally think about here in the independent lodging sector when it comes to interior design.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as lodging people, I think, owners, management people in lodging, there's so many things to think about. And just having an expert that looks at it from that perspective of the guest and what's the guest perception. I would think, again, not ever owning an inn or a B&B or whatever, it's hard to say, but they're so busy, such a busy life that it's easy to get lost in the weeds and not think about those things. So I think having somebody from the outside who understands that and can provide that perspective, the guest perspective, is really worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we hope you enjoy this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with James Kuester, the founder of Küster Design. And James and Steve, how you both doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Steve Short, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Matt. I always wait for the guest to say hello, and so that's why I held off on that. But James, you can be more vocal.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Good. There we go. Got to get him loosened up a little bit. All right.
There we go. Awesome. Well, this is going to be fun. And James, really look forward to talking with you today. And before we really kind of dive into your interior design services for the independent lodging sector, would love to hear more about Küster Design, how you got started, your background, all that good stuff.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Kuester Design, we're 22 years in as a full service interior design firm, but kind of took a circuitous route to get here. If we reach way back to the late 80s, I was working on my master's thesis for my master's in management degree and wanted to really explore how design was being implemented in the hospitality industry. And so, in my master's thesis, I looked at various aspects of both small, medium, and large properties and different aspects of their operations and whatnot. And then, went out and got a job in the real world, and no one in hospitality hired me. So ended up in manufacturing for about 15 years or so. And that master's thesis got put on the shelf. And wasn't until I thought, oh, I'm going to launch a line of independent furniture in 2002. And the firm started really focused on furniture design and has evolved over the years into full service, interiors firm.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So when you got into your first real job or whatever, the real world experience of manufacturing, so what was undergrad? Was it design or it's engineering? Is that what you did
The
undergrad?
undergrad is bachelor's in industrial engineering, and
Industrial engineering. Okay.
a lot of, and my emphasis within, that program was, more operations and human factors engineering. And so pairing that with the master's in management, got a lot of exposure to marketing concepts and also operations management concepts. I got employed to, work making electric motors, which was, not nearly as glamorous as being in hospitality. But my family, we traveled a lot when I was a little kid. And so I think that love of travel and early exposure to independent inns, small properties, restaurants, and so forth really sparked, a passion in me for travel and hospitality.
Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty bold, though, to say, okay, I'm going to launch this line of furniture. Was that geared toward hospitality? Did you get to the point of, I'm sick and tired of, motors and those kinds of things? I want to branch out on my own. And I've always had this interest in hospitality. Or was it more generic sort of offering that you started off?
Initially, it was more generic. I had been commissioned to design some pieces for the commercial space, like conference rooms, small offices, residential. And, my designs were accepted into juried shows in New York and San Francisco. But, launching a design firm on the heels of 9/11, the market wasn't strong. And I also figured out I didn't really have deep enough pockets to go, full bear against the big boys in a whole, new furniture line. And so kind of pivoted, where who can buy my services and talents and where can I apply those talents to helping clients.
Okay. So has it always been the smaller independent hospitality properties that have hired you, or have you done, do you do boutique type stuff, or is it, even that is still kind of an independent sort of approach, right? It's not like you've gone after the big brands or anything like that, right?
Right. All my clients have been small business owners. I like working with small business owners, whether they're, own a small independent lodging property or restaurant, wine tasting room. Definitely, I personally prefer working with the business owner. They know what they want. They know where their pain is within their business. Have also worked in small healthcare, like independent dental offices, optometry offices. But no, Steve, I've never really gone after, the Hiltons, Marriotts of the world. That's not really the space that I play in.
Right. Okay. So if I am, let's say I'm a property owner, I've got an inn that is relatively small, 5 to 10 rooms or whatever. What's a good example of, hey, I think I need James to help me out here? Give me some examples of projects. I would think like a kitchen redesign would be one thing. I know, of course, I'm a huge old house guy, as you can see behind me. So I wouldn't want to mess with this stuff, right? And a lot of B&Bs that have historic details, you don't want to mess with that stuff. But it seems like more functional kinds of areas. But it also depends. There's a lot of, I guess, newer spaces that are being used now for bed and breakfasts and inns and that sort of thing. So give us an idea of the kinds of places, I guess, spaces and situations where someone would say, hey, I need a designer like you, and here's what the kind of thing that you would do in working with a property?
So, when I start working with a property owner, I like to look at all of the aspects, where the guest is interacting with the property, right from the moment they pull up, what is that visual of the property? Because that, putting my branding and marketing hat on, that sets that first impression, right? When you walk up, and what are those interaction points that the property is having with the guests, and then as that runs all the way through, and how can we redesign or enhance the design of the property to improve the guest interaction. And just some examples are, while we don't want to change the historic nature of a property, is there a better, doorknob, for example, that could be used that would still be indicative or reflective of the property, but easier for somebody that has a disability to enjoy the property? Is there a different material that could be used on the floors that would aid in cleaning, right? Still give a really great experience to the guests, but from the property owner is easier to clean and maintain and provide greater, longevity and a return for their investment in that area rug or that flooring. Other areas that we look at, even though somebody's coming to an independent inn, they still like, the conveniences of being able to plug their devices in to charge, right? And, the older your property, the less conveniently located electrical outlets are. So how can we, short of rewiring the whole house, provide plenty of places for a guest to plug in and charge their devices, and still it's attractive, it's convenient. If they like to read in bed, what kind of bedside lighting is there? So there's good lighting, but again, the aesthetic, it speaks to the brand of the property and the historic nature of the property, and doesn't start looking too, corporate. It doesn't, you don't want it to look like a Hampton Inn or, a Hilton, because, your independent properties are all unique. Areas that, we've really worked to try to improve our bathrooms, right? Guest experiences in bathrooms in small properties are probably where people struggle, with shower curtains, clawfoot tubs, just the squeezing bathrooms into houses that didn't always have them. It, is a
Right.
challenge, right? And then how do you do that in a way that is still provides convenience for the guest, as to where, say, their towels are located, or where do they put their toothbrush and deodorants and whatnot, that is convenient, but again, within the context of a bathroom that's maybe squeezed into an old closet, right? When the house was being turned into a bed and breakfast. So
So
there
do
is
you,
any aspect of that property that we don't try to look at.
so that's interesting, because I was assuming that it would be redesign, rehab, restore, whatever you want to call it, more like construction based stuff that you do. And maybe that's based upon what I remember, I guess, when we met last fall at Michigan Bed and Breakfast Association. I remember looking at your one of those portfolio books that you had, and it seemed like
Mhm.
built-ins and a lot of that stuff that I love, that custom woodwork, cabinetry, whatever. So that's what I was kind of thinking of. But what you're saying is, rather than necessarily a specific thing in mind, I mean, I'm sure clients have something in mind, but you can actually provide kind of a bigger picture, really, of the whole property if you wanted to. If they said, hey, what in general, what do you suggest that we do to improve upon? I mean, maybe they have certain areas, and it doesn't have to necessarily involve any kind of construction type work. Like you say, it could be, here's the kind of lamps that you should use or whatever. Is that right?
Right. Because I try to be very mindful of, project budgets. And, I do joke with my client, Steve, that, I personally don't have any fun if I don't get to move walls around, but I'm also, a preservationist at heart. And so you've got a house that's 120 years old and it has, charm and character and a unique story. So the challenge on that kind of a project is how do we enhance what is there, bring it forward into the 21st century without losing that historic nature and character of the underlying fabric of the property that we're working with. And one of the areas that I can think of is, like your breakfast service or your afternoon tea service. How are you going to do this in a way that is reflective of the brand of the property, respectful of the historic nature of the property, but is easy to clean, easy to maintain, isn't going to wear out, and provides a great experience for the guests. Because we look at every aspect through that dual lens of the property owner. I want it to be cost effective and low maintenance or easy maintenance, and the guest wants to have a unique and rich experience, and not just feel like they're going to a fast food restaurant or, somebody threw cookies on a paper plate.
So now, if I have a need, whether it's, and it sounds like I could be at various stages of concept when I engage with you. It could be, hey, I'm just not happy with the way breakfast, whether it's the kitchen to the breakfast room or wherever, right? So I know I want to do something. I need to do something, right? It's probably better to engage earlier in the concept than later. For example, I wouldn't work with an architect and then engage with you. You are the guy that would kind of come up with architectural and all of those design things. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. We're appropriate depending upon where we're working. We certainly partner with architects, structural engineers, electrical people to bring the right talent into a project as needed on a case by case basis. And, every state has nuances in their regulations as who's, required to sign off on various stages of the project. So we readily bring together or put together the right team to execute depending upon the scope of the project, and are quite upfront that we're not going to take on something if we don't have the technical expertise to do it ourselves. Then we'll find that help to bring on to the project.
Is location a challenge, or will you pretty much go anywhere in the, what's kind of your geographic area? Do you have any restrictions?
We have studios in Indiana, Wisconsin, and New York, and are just looking at opening one in Arizona. I used to say we could easily go anywhere east of the Mississippi. Now with clients, west of the Mississippi, I'm saying, east of the Rockies is easy. Travel, depending upon the property owner and the size of the property, travel to the West Coast can get prohibitive from a cost standpoint. But we try to circumvent that through technology. We will send a LiDAR equipped iPad out to the clients and let them scan specific places and send that back to us so that we don't have to go out and do the physical measurements of the spaces. We do as many of the meetings over, Zoom or Teams as we can. Pre-COVID, I thank COVID for moving people's mindset forward in terms of not every meeting has to be a in-person, face-to-face meeting. And there comes a time on every project where it's important to just be in that physical space and location to get the real essence of the property and a real sense of the flow. But so much of it can be done, remotely and virtually that, we're happy to work anywhere.
Wow, that's cool. Has there been a project where you never were actually on site that you did work on?
Yes. There was a property in Florida that I have never seen uh, in person.
That's
It was all
cool.
done from the property owner taking measurements, sending photos, interacting, virtually with them, and, coming up with plans and, product specifications, collaborating with them through the construction process and procurement processes so that it was all executed. And yeah, I've at no stage of that property have I been present for.
Wow. Okay. Now, how do you charge for your services? Is it an hourly thing? Is it kind of per job kind of a thing? And I guess it depends on your role, how much oversight you have, or maybe you don't have any oversight. Maybe, and I understand this from the software standpoint, that custom bespoke work, right, can involve various people, like you say, builders, structural people, whatever, some of whom you might have, people that you work with, and other times your client doesn't want that. So how do you figure out, for those listening, if they're interested, how would they know in terms of how you would price things out?
We typically, just like other professionals, your attorney, your CPA, we charge by the hour. Like to have an initial conversation, and we do not charge for that, to get a really good feel for the scope of what, is wanting to be done. And from that, we'll write up an estimate of how many hours we think it'll take to execute that scope. And if everybody is in agreement that we've captured the scope statement accurately, then we start working, and, nobody's ever locked in to a contract. It's like, well, this is our estimate. We're going to bill you on an hourly rate to execute this. And if we start veering off scope, we'll say, hey, this is different, right? But as long as everybody understands, we try to keep it as informal as possible, but still have those, guardrails that things can't go sideways in a relationship.
And so now, are you the guy that does the drawings and stuff? Are you, because I know you're an engineer, but you're not an architect, at least I'm sure
Anyone on
your
the team
design
has the
work.
ability to do drawings. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. And I'm the one that does most of the code review when we have to get into code review types of things, depending upon the project. If we're reviewing building codes for accessibility, life safety plans, that kind of stuff, I'm typically doing those kind of reviews. But anyone on our team can prepare the drawings.
Okay. And then when it is, drawings imply construction based stuff, is there, I guess not every contractor is equal probably in terms of capability. So how do you make sure, or is it really up to your client, property owner, to engage, assuming you're just saying, okay, here's my design, here's follow this, go out and get somebody to follow this. At that point, they're not considering you to be on the hook to make sure their contractor puts up the right stuff, are they?
Well, you described my worst case scenario where we're not involved at all. If a client has a contractor they have worked with in the past and really likes that, we're happy to work with that client. If they know no one, we will make recommendations of who, we think would be a good fit for the project. We have gone as far as, on larger projects, helping our clients go through a bid and review process to, solicit, say, 5 bids, throw out the high, the low, and interview the middle 3 to select who is the best fit. Because it's not all about price. It's a lot of personality and other soft skills that go into finding a contractor that the client's going to be comfortable with, right? Because they're going to be in their
Right.
space for, quite a while. And what is their approach to, the overall project management. If we're only doing construction in one part of the property and not the other, we look at how do they mitigate dust and dirt and whatnot, so we're not negatively impacting parts of the property that are not under construction. So we try to bring that expertise and experience to the project on our behalf of our clients and stay with it all the way through completion when the contractor's done and pulled off and the property is turned back over to the client. So from that aspect, if somebody's looking at, say our fees compared to somebody that isn't as involved, we may look expensive, but trying to educate our clients that we don't just say, here, take our plans, have fun, because we want to be fully engaged to make sure that when questions come up, that we're there to answer them, because I've never had a project that questions didn't come up. And again, in old properties, you rip into a wall, no one knows what they're going to find, right? I mean, you think you know what's in that wall, and odds are you don't. It's always so we like to stay with the clients and make sure things go smoothly.
So it sounds like part of the value you provide is kind of wanting, not only sort of setting the vision and, hey, here's exactly what we see that we want to have built, but really kind of overseeing that and seeing it through to the end. And you prefer to be engaged and have a say probably in who's responsible for doing the building of the stuff that you're designing, right?
Right. I mean, I don't want, and this is where we've gotten involved quite a bit with contractors during the construction phase. If a change needs to be made, I want to look at it, how do we retain the design intent, but maybe approach it from a lower cost angle? We've got something that we weren't expecting. We don't want to just throw a whole bunch of money at this and pick the highest cost solution. So how do we pivot, but still retain that original design intent for the project?
Yeah, that makes sense. And the thing is, you're with the hourly billing, it's not, you can be concerned with helping your client minimize the cost. And, it might be worthwhile for you to spend a couple extra hours in order to do that and save the client more money in the longer run. That's what it sounds like. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'd like to hear about a project or two that's either off the wall, really cool, some combination, or, tell us what stands out. You've been doing this for 22 years, right? So whether it's a funny story, obviously you don't want to tell a nightmare project story probably, but unless it's a lesson learned for our listeners, right? I mean, what's a good story? Or, maybe it was that you opened up a wall and found, what was Geraldo with the trying to find, remember the safe of
Oh,
who
yes.
was that? Al Capone's safe. That was
Al
a total
Capone,
bust,
yes.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So
I think there needed to have been some, maybe delayed footage of that one, because it was,
Right.
I was watching that episode and it's like, this is a big
instead of live broadcast. Yeah. So any projects out there that come to mind that would just be kind of fun to hear about? I put you on the spot. I'm sorry. So.
Yeah. I think I really like kitchens and baths, right? And so when our clients are working in their kitchen, right, the guests don't get to see the kitchen, but the client gets to be there, especially if they're an innkeeper that likes to cook. So how, making sure we're designing the kitchen so it flows the way the cook cooks. And so we had a client a couple of years back that really loved, saran wrap, and would buy, the big industrial rolls of saran wrap, right? And he wanted to be able to just reach over here, grab, his sheet of saran wrap and rip off as much as he wanted. So we designed a whole custom saran industrial size. The rolls are about 6 inches.
Yeah. Having worked in In
right?
restaurants, I remember those. Yeah.
That he
Yeah.
could plop his big industrial size roll of saran wrap into this container and then just pull it and rip it off, and it would have its serrated edge. And when he wasn't doing that, it needed to be all hidden away. So if anyone saw the kitchen, it looked very hidden away and clean and stuff. And that was a lot of fun to again engineer, design. How do we create this, saran wrap holder? On that same project, we spent an inordinate number of hours designing the interior of the cabinets to hold all of his Tupperware. He was very particular about how he wanted his Tupperware to be organized and to get the right custom inserts designed to hold the Tupperware the way, he wanted that. On the bathroom side, we worked on a project and the clients were wanting to have a steam shower, right? But they didn't just want to have a typical steam shower and stick a teak bench in there. All of it needed to be built in. And then going, but how do we get water everywhere that we want water? And so looking at, and this was fairly a simple solution is, you have your slide bars for the shower wands. It's like, well, you're not limited to one, right? We could put 3 or 4 of these in the shower. If we locate the valve in the right place, one shower wand can reach multiple of these slide bars. And then depending upon where you want to be inside your steam shower, you can get your water to go anywhere. And to, that concept that, oh, we have one wand, we can just have one shower rod, right? I mean, or slide rod. It was like when I said that we could have more, the client goes, we can have more than one. Yeah, it's not a 1-for-1 ratio here, right?
There's no
So
code restrictions on that one, right?
right.
Or design restrictions. So interesting.
No design restrictions on that one. But I love when the client gets really excited about an element that we're working on. I was showing these clients, and this has happened in 2 different areas. Typically when you get down to selecting countertop material, right? And I pre-select a stone that I think is going to fit within the budget and then take the clients to look at the whole slabs. They're always like a kid in the candy store. It's hard to keep them focused on the product that is in their budget. And they always zoom over here and find something that is much more expensive. And then they would, it's like, well, can't we use this? And I said, well, we can, but it's your money. I didn't show you that for a reason. And the same thing like with carpeting. I was meeting with clients once and looking at different carpet, and I happened to have a sample of a much, much more expensive carpet than was in their budget. And they saw that poking out of my bag and go, what's that one? And so I pulled it out and I said, well, this is really nice carpet. And they go, well, we want that one. Well, it only was like 10 times more per square foot than what fit in their budget. But other things, working with an old house, and it had leaded glass windows. And we were removing a wall and adding some new banisters and stuff. And really enjoyed pulling some of the design elements that were original to the property in those leaded glass windows into the new newel post and banister to make that brand new, 21st century element look like it was put in, 120 years ago.
Yeah, that's cool. So to wrap up, what suggestions would you give to a property owner if they're thinking about a project or getting somebody involved like you? What suggestions do you have? Like, okay, obviously you think it's a good idea for them to have a designer, right? Rather than just try to do it themselves. And that investment is hopefully worth it, because once if they just go to the construction company and say, hey, come in and start, build some built-in cabinets for me or whatever, that they might end up just not being happy because of the design. That's what it comes down to, I guess. But once they're convinced that, okay, I need to work with somebody to nail down the design, and like you say, integrate the human side with what is being built. How do you suggest they go about that? Obviously, you're one option, but maybe they want to work with someone locally or whatever. What would you suggest in terms of finding somebody to do design, or what to keep in mind with any project that they might want to do?
One of the things to keep in mind when, say, interviewing designers is, does the designer have an expertise within commercial spaces, right? Because one of the things our clients are buying is access to products that may look residential in nature, say for a bed and breakfast, but are commercial grade. And I preach this and all the time is investing in commercial grade products. You're running a commercial establishment. You're not, just inviting people into your home, right? So the flooring, the upholstery, the furniture, you want the pieces to be indicative and reflective of your brand, but also manufactured in a grade that you're going to get a good return on your investment and comes with better warranties. Commercial products typically have 7 to 10 year warranties. Residential products don't have any such warranty. And in fact, if you're using them commercially, what warranty they have are typically void. And the other advantage of working with a designer is uniqueness of product, right? So again, you're running an independent inn. You don't probably want your guests to walk in and say, well, I saw that at Home Depot or Menards. You want to retain that uniqueness of your property. And by working with the designer, no matter who they are, they have access to product that you're never going to see at a big box retailer, and getting that uniqueness of product, whether it's decorative items, furnishings, flooring, upholstery, it helps retain and preserve the uniqueness of your property versus just going out here to a local big box and buying stuff that anyone can go and do, and then they may have seen that lamp, or they may have seen that rug, or may even have it at home, and then you've undermined the uniqueness of the experience and brand.
Yeah, that makes sense. Matt, you want to
take us out?
Take us out? I don't know. Is there anything else?
Cool.
Well, you're the one that asked that question.
Yes. So James, before I usually do my outro here, my last question is there anything else to add or anything we may have missed today?
Well, one of the things, just I guess a little service offering plug is we're happy to come, and me in particular, and do an initial walkthrough with clients, right? They may be struggling with what they need to do, and come spend, a night and part of a day with them in their property to then offer, that perspective of, okay, this is what the guest is seeing from a third-party trained eye as to what can or cannot be, improved upon, and offer that up as a good starting off point for, okay, well, where do we go from here? And creating an action plan that could be even years in the making, right, to how we move our property from point A to point B.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and contact information. We'll put it in the show notes, but let people know, how do they get a hold of you or find out more about you?
Can always, visit our website, kuesterdesign.com. Email me, james@kuesterdesign.com, or our phone number, which, I could rattle off, but probably better.
We can put that in the show notes. Yeah.
Put that in the show notes.
Yes. Yeah.
And talking to us up front is always free. Happy to learn about the pain, that somebody's having. What are they struggling with? And working collaboratively to figure out, okay, what's the best approach to move that forward and start, relieving some of that pain.
Yep. Understood. Okay. All right, Matt.
I'll take us out. So this concludes this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with James Kuester, who's the founder of Kuester Design. And as you heard, James was kind enough to share his insights on his interior design services for the independent lodging sector. And our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest App, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. James, thank you so much for your time today. This was a wonderful podcast. And Steve Short, it is always a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, James. We appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks.